Okay, so we're going to be going over North Carolina geography. Okay, so we're going to be going over North Carolina geography. And we're starting out by first looking at the Tidewater region. And you can see here in this picture that I have up, or this map that I have up, that this is that North Carolina is divided up into four regions. We have the Tidewater, Coastal Plain, Piedmont, and the Mountain region. And it is bordered by several states: Virginia to the north, Tennessee to the west, Georgia to the southwest, and South Carolina to the south. It is also bordered on the east by the Atlantic Ocean. And just to point this out, this right here in the blue is what the region we will be focusing on in this video. Okay, so if you're doing notes, you can pause wherever you need to and fill those out, and then you can just continue the video. So um, this is the Outer Banks of North Carolina, or what we call the Barrier Islands. And I'm going to back up just a minute because I want you to go back and see what this looks like on this map. So you see the area we're talking about. We're talking about this skinny line of islands that's right here on the east coast of North Carolina. And so I just want you to know where we're talking about. So this is what you just saw on that map. This is the Barrier Islands of North Carolina. They are a narrow strip of land near the Atlantic Ocean. I guess you could say in the Atlantic Ocean, but they are connected to North Carolina. They're between 30 and 50 miles wide, depending on where you're looking at. When you flip back here and you look at this, you can see that it's a little wider here than it is, say, somewhere up in here or down in here. And you can even see a big difference right there. It's skinny, and then it goes out a little wider, and then it gets skinny again. So just depending on where it's at. They do change their shape and their size from time to time due to erosion because of where they're at. They are prone to hurricanes and tropical storms, things like that. Ocean gets angry, winds are blowing hard, and it just kind of shifts the sand around. They are barrier islands. There are other barrier islands in the world, such as there are some off the coast of Australia. Ours in North Carolina have a specific name, and they are called the Outer Banks. So the Outer Banks would be the proper noun, which is we would always capitalize Outer Banks. And so you'll hear a lot of people refer to the Outer Banks of North Carolina. Pretty famous. This is an image of Jockey's Ridge, which is located in the Outer Banks. It is the tallest sand dune in North Carolina, and it was measured at one point at 114 feet, but due to erosion and shifting wind, shifting sand around, and hurricanes blowing through, because it's right across the street from the ocean, it's right near the ocean. It changes, it varies, it depends on what when you would take the measurement of it. It might be lower than 114, it might be taller, just depends on how much damage has been done to the area. This is a shoal. And a shoal is, if you look right in here, you can see that the sand has formed a sandbar or a sandbank underneath the water. And this just means, I'm going to read the definition for you. A shoal is an area in a body of water where a sandbank or sandbar creates shallow water. So something has caused the sand to bunch up and pile up in this area, probably some current underneath the ocean, along with, as we said earlier, along with hurricanes and strong winds and strong ocean currents have pushed it, and it has just piled up here in this area. And so this is called a shoal. Now, this means the water is not as deep here as it is here, or as it is here. And so this would have been super dangerous 200, 300, 400 years ago, even 100 years ago, when you have ships sailing through here. They didn't have a lot of sophisticated equipment. like sonar and GPS to know how deep the ocean is, and they're coming through this area, and they would actually bottom the ship out, meaning that they would what they say run aground and hit this and get stuck. And when a ship does that, the force of the crash could cause it to tip over and tip sideways. It could be very dangerous, and it certainly could mean that they would lose anything they were carrying with them. The most famous of North Carolina's is Diamond Shoal, and so that's why I put that on here. Now, this word cape means land that juts or sticks out into water, and that's what you see here. I'm going to move on to the next slide because I want to point, let's see. This right here is an example of a cape right here. This is Cape Hatteras. So that goes with this with this word. It's a little bit better way for you to see it. Now, Cape Hatteras itself, Cape Hatteras is called, the waters off the coast of North Carolina, right where Cape Hatteras is at, are called the Graveyard of the Atlantic. That is their nickname. And we're going to be looking at why it's called Graveyard of the Atlantic. And it's because a lot of ships have sank there. And as I pointed out earlier, this right here is Cape Hatteras. Remember, Cape is the land that juts or sticks out into water. And this is Cape Hatteras. North Carolina has 3 capes, and this is one. This is the one that is probably the most famous because of the Graveyard of the Atlantic. And you can see here that there were different ships that have sank. But when we look at the next picture, you can see there were even more ships that historically have been known to have sank off the coast of North Carolina. This is Pamlico Sound, and this is the Atlantic Ocean over here, and Cape Hatteras is right here. And these waters all off of here, look how many ships have sank. And I'm sure there are probably plenty more that sank before anybody was keeping records of such things, or the records were lost for these. Now, let's look at why it's so dangerous in this area. Why did so many ships sink? Well, this is the coast of North Carolina again. And the Gulf of Mexico is located right down below. If you think about where Texas is at, the Gulf of Mexico is right south of Texas, and that is pretty warm. The water in the Gulf of Mexico is pretty warm. Well, there's a current or a stream that runs through the ocean or under the ocean, and it comes out of the Gulf of Mexico. It goes around Florida, up past Georgia, up past South Carolina, and right past the coast of North Carolina. And so this water flows almost like a river through a stream through the Atlantic Ocean. And so it brings super warm waters out of the Gulf of Mexico. And you know they're super warm. They're indicated by that on this map by colors. That orange area right there is means that it's super warm water. I don't mean hot like boiling water, but pretty warm. You know, just a few degrees off can affect things such as what we're talking about. So this is warm, not too warm that you couldn't get in it. Fish live in it, and so it's not boiling. But it is pretty warm water. Definitely warmer than what you would get, say, out of the water fountain that we have or something like that. So this water is constantly moving, and coming with it is winds that's coming with it. So constantly moving. Now, coming out, this is Canada up here. And coming out of Canada is another stream of water that brings cool air with it. And this is actually pretty cold water that's coming out called the Labrador Current. And it continuously flows through the Atlantic heading south. This is heading more northeast. This is heading southwest. And look where they collide. Because of North Carolina's location on a U.S. map, when you think about a U.S. map, it kind of sort of sticks out further here than South Carolina does, and even than Virginia. This is Virginia right here. North Carolina sticks out pretty far further than any of the other southern states, that are southeast states, eastern states that are over here. And so the warm and the cold happen to collide right off the coast of North Carolina. And they say that is what caused so many ships to sink, because 400 years ago, you'd have people coming through there, and they had no idea about this. This had not been studied or wasn't known that well, and they really didn't have any way to predict it. There weren't meteorologists, and there wasn't fancy sonars and stuff like that. And so this couldn't be predicted. So people would be coming over from England and sailing along, trying to come over to America, and they came a lot of times in this way, which we'll learn about in our next unit. Um, and they would come in this area. They have no idea that at any time these volatile storms could come up and it would overtake their ships. So pretty dangerous, and that explains why a lot of ships sank there. Now, on this map, there's nothing for you to copy down if you're doing notes on this, but you do get a look at Albemarle Sound up here, and super important to know, Pamlico Sound is here. Pamlico River is right here. Now, a sound is a body of water. People kind of sort of think it's ocean. It is kind of ocean. It's right there. But we know that the ocean is salt water, has a lot of salt in it. Well, river water doesn't have that much salt in it. It's what we call fresh water. So you have fresh water and salt water. And the two of those kind of mix in a sound because you have water coming out of the Pamlico River, dumping into the Pamlico Sound, and you have salt water coming through these inlets right here. An inlet is a break in the islands. And so you have salt water that flows in through here, fresh water that comes in through here. So this is a mixture. So it does have salt in it, but because it's diluted with fresh water, this water is not quite as salty as this water. Now, looking here, we can see we do have three capes. We have Cape Hatteras, this is Cape Lookout, and this is Cape Fear. I would say Cape Fear is probably pretty well known too. Not as well known as Cape Hatteras. And I want to talk about the name of Cape Fear. Cape Fear comes from the Cape Fear River is named after the cape called Cape Fear. And the reason being is because we are kind of sort of up here, we're further over. Harnett County is kind of over here, and we know that the Cape Fear River that runs through Lillington, also it makes its way down. It goes through Wilmington, and it comes right through here, and it empties into the Atlantic Ocean. So that's why you see Cape Fear River here. Only this map doesn't show it up through here, but it does go up through here. And so if you were to get on that river in Lillington, and you were to take a boat and you were to sail down, eventually in about a week, you would end up down in this area. And if you kept sailing forward, you would actually go all the way out into the Atlantic Ocean. And so that's where Cape Fear River gets its name from. It was named after the cape, the land that juts out in the water off the coast of North Carolina called Cape Fear. Now, as we said earlier, Cape Fear empties into the Atlantic Ocean, and we do have those three capes, Cape Fear, Cape Lookout, and Cape Hatteras. I put them here because I wanted you to be able to see how they're actually all spelled, because Cape Lookout wasn't on that map. Now, I showed you the sounds with Pamlico Sound and Albemarle Sound. They are fed by rivers, as I mentioned. That is that fresh water emptying into them. Also have the salt water coming through the inlets. Some of the oldest towns in North Carolina are situated there. When the settlers first came over, they settled around sounds because I'm going to back up just a minute and go to this map right here. We'll just use this map. But when settlers first came over, they were coming from England. England was like, let's pretend that this is a world map. England would be kind of sort of over here. And they would sail across the Atlantic Ocean, and some of the first settlers settled in North Carolina, off the coast of North Carolina. And the reason they wanted to settle in these areas is because it gave an easy access to leaving to go back and forth between England as they needed to. They would settle along the rivers.
Coach Mills or...
Sorry about that. And so they would go back and forth they would settle here along the rivers because rivers provide fresh drinking water, water they can drink, water they can cook with, water they can clean with, water they can bathe in. It also is an ample supply of fish in both areas. So they would stay here and go through these inlets to head out toward England if they needed to. So That is why you see a lot of North Carolina's early towns are located in the Tidewater region, right there on the Outer Banks, right behind the Outer Banks. There was early trail routes that were between the rivers and the sounds, such as to other communities from one town to another or over toward England. Fishing is an important industry in that area. It was then, it still is today. Um, and these sounds, when we're talking about the sounds, these sounds, um, coming back to this map and looking at this, these sounds are big, but they're not necessarily super deep. And one of the reasons that they're not super deep is because um, the rivers are constantly flowing into them and they are picking up sediment. Sediment is little tiny pieces of rock, dirt, anything like that. And as the rivers flow, it's picking them up and dropping. The water runs into here, and the sediment will fall into the bottoms of the sound. And this has been going on for millions of years. Constant flowing of rivers, and rivers we know can run pretty fast, especially when there's been a lot of rain and it puts more water in the river and it causes the water to rush even more. And it's just constantly putting sediment into these sounds, and it fills in the bottom of the sound. The way you can imagine, if I had a bowl of water and it was an empty bowl of water, it's going to hold one amount of water. But if I poured a bunch of rocks in the bottom of the bowl, it's not going to hold as much water because we filled in the bottom and we've made it super shallow. It's not going to be as deep. And so that's what happened to these sounds over time. Sediment fills in and they're just not as deep. And because they're not as deep, it was really hard many years ago, even today, but they know this now, but it was hard to, oh, I can't seem to get that right. Hold on. There we go. It was hard to get these big ships into that area. That's going to become a huge issue at some point when we start talking about. I think it's like our Unit 4 or Unit 5. Anyway, when we talk about the Carolina colony, when we get into, and we'll focus on the North Carolina colony, and we'll learn how there was a lot of issues, a lot of trouble over the fact that these um, sounds were what we call not very navigable, meaning that it was hard to navigate big ships through there. And I mentioned the sounds earlier. I showed you a couple of them on the map. Largest sounds are Pamlico, Currituck, Albemarle, Core, and Bogue Sound. Now, this is one of the oldest towns I mentioned earlier. This is Bath. This is a really old map, so this doesn't look like it, but this actually says Pamlico River, and out this way would be the Pamlico Sound. And I just wanted you to see this is North Carolina's oldest town that survived. There was some that they tried to establish, but they didn't survive. But Bath did survive, and it is still a town today. Swamps and lakes. Most of North Carolina's natural lakes are found in the Tidewater region, meaning that if there's a lake in the Tidewater, if there's a lake in North Carolina that is not man-made, it probably is in the Tidewater region. Lake Mattamuskeet is the largest of those in the Tidewater region. Even though it's the largest and takes up the most surface area, it's only about 6 feet deep, so it's not super deep. Couldn't take great big ships into it. Green Swamp down in the Tidewater region is the home to the Venus flytrap. It is also, Tidewater is the least populated area of the state because there's so much swampy areas that it is hard, and sandy areas, it is really hard to for people to grow and build things there. This is the Green Swamp. I know that looks like ground, but that is not. That is actually swampy water with, I guess, pollen and algae and stuff growing on top of it. So, and that looks like cypress trees. And this is what a Venus flytrap looks like.